Well, I had 2 weeks of diving deep into essential agreements, conditions, and terms. And I'd like to sum up just the main points for you in this one video presentation. Again, I need to say here, disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. I'm sharing terms with you as I have them applied and as I found them helpful, useful, and especially profit supportive, if that's even a word. Yes, so I'm sharing with you things that just worked very well for me. We talked a little bit about terms that are applicable for some of these agreements that are important, but we also need to talk about what's applicable for you. What you would do as a producer, you could do two things. You could put a little company together for your production company if you are a producer, if that's what you want. So the production company would then produce all the movies that you would ever produce, let's say. And then for this very special project, you put a single purpose vehicle company together, which is only to do with this one project. And the reason why you want to do that is because you want to limit your risk just to this project. If something would go wrong with this project and you would start being involved in lawsuits, and these things happen, trust me, I know, that's the price of success. So let's say you get sued on your project. It's very important to ring fence that project in this single purpose vehicle, because then it cannot affect your production company entirely and other projects that might be in the production company. So that's why you limit your risk by doing both. And you can very simply just put together, if you're in the US, a little LLC. You can literally do this online. I think it costs like $150. So it's very easy to do. We're going to talk about some of the essential development, production, and packaging terms. We're going to look into finance distribution agreements and terms, and we're going to look a little bit at the completion bond and the producer agreements. The agreements you will most likely find in your production, and these are not all of them, but they're the most important ones, is obviously your option rights purchase agreement, your talent deals, your finance deals, your producer deals, your marketing and publicity deals, and your bank closing and bank terms, your bond deal, and your chain of title. Let's talk about some of the essential terms that would be applicable. So for the option and rights agreement, if you have hired a guild writer, you need to adhere to guild requirements. The option rights should be at least 1 year, if not more. The option payment you make should be against the purchase price. There would be a turnaround clause in that agreement, which basically means that if the project that you're working on is not done by you and it's done by someone else, you would be asking this other person to pay you a turnaround fee, which is basically paying you back for all the costs that are related to the development of the project. Obviously, you talk about rewrites in there in your rights purchase agreement. You talk about the chain of title having to be clear, and you are requesting the writer to be, or you want the writer to be, in the collection agent management agreement in case they are a profit participant, which they might be. As it relates to the talent deal for the director, sometimes the director is sent a pay or play offer. Sometimes it's just a letter that says, I want you and here's what you're going to get. In some cases, the director would want a development deal to work with you on the script. And the director should be hired subject to cast approval and subject to the bond company approving the director. Because if you hire a director that your cast doesn't want to be working with, you have to have an out. If you hire a director that is not bondable, you have to have an out. You will talk to the director about the remuneration as well as a back-end profit participation if applicable. You'll make sure that the director is not going to insist on final cut. It's usually a headache. Don't want that headache. But you can offer the director to apply DGA rules and regulations, even if the director is not in the DGA. What that means is that the director would get a chance to have a screening happen that would basically decide whether or not the director cut is has a good chance of being successful or not. Because after the director cut is ready, it's going to be your job as the producer to change it if you want to. The director should be in the CAMA if he has a profit participation. As it relates to the talent deal, it all starts with the pay-up offer that you would send. The deal would then done with the actual loan out agreement, meaning the you do an engagement letter and an engagement agreement with your cast. The deal you do with the cast would be subject to them approving the director. It would be subject to the bond approving them, meaning, if the cast member might be, a drug addict, you don't know, and the bond company says we don't want to hire him because he didn't pass the health test, then this would be an out. You discuss how much money you're going to pay as a remuneration and your back-end participation, if there is one. You will make sure that the talent has no creative approval, and you are going to apply SAG rules if they are applicable. The talent would be in the KAMA if they have a back-end profit participation. The sales agency agreement would be so that you would have to approve the sales estimates the agent issues, and you would have to agree a certain, I should say, performance clause that says that the agent would, based on the sales estimates that they gave you, reach a certain level of sales within a certain level of time. You would limit the term for the sales agency agreement ideally to not more than 7 years. You would make sure that the sales agent understands that they have no creative approval, that they cannot transfer the rights, and you would specify what the sales fee is and cap the market and distribution expenses at a certain amount. You would enter in this agreement as well that if the bank requires the sales agent to defer their fees after the loan, the sales agent would do so. And you agree on delivery elements that are going to be given to the sales agent so that they can deliver the film to the distributors, and you would include the sales agent into the KAMA, and of course you would make sure that they agree to a collection agent. The distribution agreements are usually entered into by the sales agent. It's an agreement that the sales agent negotiates with the distributor. However, if you do a deal with, let's say, a domestic distributor like a studio or mini major studio or anyone who releases the film domestically, you might ideally want to make sure you get a minimum guarantee up front, and you would make sure that you also get overages in case of the project or the film being successful, and would make money in excess of the minimum guarantee. In that case, a split would be agreed, which would be payable to you and the studio after the studio has charged the distribution costs and expenses. You would of course agree payment terms, what are they paying when, they're paying a down payment or not. You would agree the term, how long will they have the right to license the film in the US. You would agree the specific rights, is it a theatrical, is it television, is it streaming, is it all of the above. You would agree the territory, is it the US, is it the US and Canada, is it something else in addition. You would agree what delivery elements the studio would want to get sent. Maybe they need a lot, maybe they need just little things, maybe they need a trailer, maybe they want posters. All of these things are agreed. And you would make sure that the distribution entity, given this is just an acquisition deal, does not have any creative approval. For the production LLC, and this could be applicable for your SPV as well as for your production entity, depending on who is part of this production LLC, you would put together an operating agreement that basically specifies what the production company does and who the members are and who holds what share. It talks about profit splits if there are other members involved in this LLC. It will discuss a budget that is allocated for overhead. You will figure out in what state you will list the LLC, any taxes that might have to be applicable, how the accounting is handled, what scope is going to be allocated to whom. You will talk about control of the project rights, and you would make sure, obviously, that this production company is part of the KAMA. If it is the SPV, it's going to be part of all of these agreements, because it's this production company, this SPV, that will enter into any and all of the agreement related to your project, including, this is the next one, the crew deals. So the crew deals are done, could be done by you, could be done by a production lawyer, and they will include all the things like it's an independent contractor, or is it a payroll situation? Is entertainment partners going to be the payroll company that deals with everything? Is it going to be a guild applicable contract? How much do you pay them? How much do you pay for travel? How much do you pay for overtime? Are there any box rentals? What is the term of the agreement? What is the scope of work? And what is the credit that they're going to get? The legal service agreement could be one where it could be a deal just for this particular picture, or it could be a deal for the entire production company. But let's assume it's just for this picture. You have options which are that you can agree for the lawyer to be just getting a percentage of the budget, which happens, or they would get a retainer and then an hourly rate for the work, and they would just bill you. I would always go for a percentage in the budget and make it like a capped amount, basically saying this is the amount you get no matter how much legal services you will give me, because that way you don't have any bad surprises. The producer service agreement is one where you as a producer would either do this deal with the completion bond company, which it would be a deal between you and them, saying them telling you what your job is, or it would be a deal between you and another producer who might be on the project with you. Either way, you will define the scope of the service, you will define if there's any approvals to anyone, you will define the fee if there's any backend, any deferments, and you will define if this producer has rights to the IP or not. If you're talking about the guild signatory agreement, this is something that's only applicable if you are shooting the film in the US under the guilds, in which case your SPV is going to have to be a guild signatory. So that's a special agreement that the guilds are preparing, that it's kind of a form, and the guilds will be part of the CAM agreement. The completion bond deal really focuses on a few things. It focuses on the budget, which becomes the bonded budget, the schedule, which becomes the bonded production schedule, the production cash flow plan, which basically shows when, how much money is released to you in order to pay for the production costs that are coming up. It's a bonded production cash flow schedule. Completion bond will talk about talent, who's in your movie. They will make sure that this talent is going to be signing all the paperwork the completion bond requires from them. They won't like stop dates, so try to avoid those, which means that, you know, if the actor is going to be doing another movie after you, make sure that there's at least 2 to 3 weeks in between. Otherwise, the bond company is going to make a stop date applicable, which means that date is the one the actor will leave your set no matter if you're ready with him or not. Not ideal. Another thing you want to avoid is essential elements. This is something that sometimes buyers will require when they buy your movie. They will say to you, okay, you have a script and you have Jason Statham starring. I want to make sure that Jason Statham is actually going to be in this movie, otherwise I'm not going to pay. That's called an essential element. What you want to do instead is you want to say, Jason Statham is in my movie, but it might be that he might not be, in which case I will replace him with someone of equal or better caliber. This language, equal or better caliber, equal or higher caliber, is one that you want to put in the agreement with the distributor, because that way you don't need to have the essential element clause in the agreement. You will talk about producer fees with your completion bond. They might be requiring for you to hold some back, and will pay them to you once you've done a good job and delivered the movie. And they will talk to you about your team, your production team, your main team, to make sure that everyone is bondable. We talked about a lot of this already, but I'm going to just walk through just some of the finance elements, elements that are important for the finance agreements. For the mezzanine deal, let's start with that because it's the first one here. You would agree a certain interest rate, a premium, an executive producer fee, a loan fee, and a back end. In some cases, it's not all of it, it's just some of it, but it's, you know, a portion of what you would agree. The term for a mezzanine deal could be anywhere from 12 to 36 months. You will define what the collateral is. You will also define if they will take over your movie if you don't pay. So that's a default scenario that's going to be going in there. You will define the recoupment position, and you will make sure that they're in the CAMA agreement. For the equity deal, you will talk about the back-end participation and ownership in the IP. In the ideal world, whatever the investment is that the equity investor gave you in relation to the budget, 50% of that should be reflective of the ownership in the IP. Depending on how much money you get from the equity investor, you might have to agree to some kind of a creative or business approval component, and you want to make sure that the equity investor is included in the CAMA. For any and all of the financiers, by the way, you are definitely making sure that you define the recoupment position very specifically. The incentives loan is a deal that you do with your tax credit lender, where you specify that you're not going to be paying them back, where you specify what discount is going to be applicable, what fees are going to be applicable, like the executive producer fee, a loan fee, a legal fee, and you're going to make sure that they will be paying you at a certain time. They are not part of the CAMA in most cases, and that's why this is not listed here. If you have co-production deals, in case you're doing a deal with a co-producer either in the US or outside of the US, we'll talk about the terms that are applicable to your project. You will talk about anything that they have to do in order to get paid a producer fee. Let's say, for example, it's a co-producer in another country. You would tell them, you're going to be my co-producer if you deliver to me this and this and this amount of local subsidies, and you get paid based on how much money you can actually get me. So you're very specific on what the deal is. With no matter who you're producing, you always define the scope, you always define the fees, you always define the back end, and you define any rights splits if applicable. You also define milestones, which says that you dictate to the producer, the co-producer, what you want from them and by when you want it. And if they don't deliver by then, the deal is null and void. As it relates to your bank deal, you are first getting your term sheet, which already tells you what your interest rate is, what your loan fee is, what the terms are, what the collateral is, how much money they will give you, how much discount they will apply, all these things. And you then will also have a long list of documents that they require in order to do what's called the bank closing. That is a huge list, way too long to list here, but once you're in the closing process, you will see it. You're going to need a lawyer to handle the bank closing for you, by the way, because it's just too much. Even for me, I wouldn't dare do this on my own. But the bank lawyer is going to be someone that the bank is going to work with you on, because it's basically one that you both decide who it is. So the thing that's important for you to agree with the bank is where their recoupment position is. Are they going to recoup after the collection agent? Are they going to be before? Are they going to let the sales agent recoup their fees or not? All these things you have to agree with them. The music investment deal is pretty straightforward. It's basically saying they pay for your music budget and they get all the residuals and nothing else. The crowdfunding deal is like a Kickstarter campaign where you agree, whatever the crowdfunder requires in order for them to help you raise the funds. And usually it's limited to a commission that they charge and the requirement of a back-end participation if there is one. For the sponsorship deal, you really have to do a deal with each and every brand, unless you do a deal with an agency that will handle the deal with each and every brand. But whatever it is, it's going to be very specific to the brand, and it's going to be very specific to the message and to the integration that's going to be serviced. For crowdfunding, you probably do the same thing. Each and every deal is going to be with each and every service provider. So whoever it is, you do basically a crew deal with them that says, I'm only going to pay you X or nothing, and here's what you get for that, which is potentially a profit participation. Your collection management agreement is basically something that the collection agent will do for you. You don't have to do this. All you do is give them the parties that you're working with and the deal terms that are applicable, and then they will put this agreement together for you and they will circulate it to all the parties, and then all the parties will give notes on that agreement. So that's an agreement that's done with everyone included.